and something was standing behind him. Macy didn't remember unlocking the door. One moment, she was frozen behind the curtain, watching the dead man breathe beneath the flickering streetlight, and the next, she was standing in her hallway, her hand pressed against her chest, like she was trying to keep something inside from tearing its way out. Her phone buzzed, once then again, but when she pulled it from her pocket, there were no notifications, no missed calls. The screen was blank, just her reflection warped by the fingerprint smudges and a hairline crack that hadn't been there yesterday. Then outside, Griffin was gone. She stood there, barefoot on cold tile, trying to rewind what she'd seen in her mind. The voice, the baby, that woman's whisper. But every time she got close to remembering the exact words, a static hum crawled into her ears, thick like molasses, dragging a migraine behind it. She blinked, and for half a second, her own face in the dark glass of the microwave twisted, not melted, not monstrous, just off, like someone doing a poor impression of her smile. She staggered back, nearly knocking over a stool. Then a knock came at the door. Soft, polite, like whoever was on the other side didn't want to be heard. She didn't answer it. The knock came again 3 times, even rhythmic to calm for this hour. When she finally pulled the door open, no one was there. No footsteps, no car engine fading into the distance. But taped to her peephole with a strip of blue medical gauze was a single Polaroid. The image was overexposed, almost too bright to make out, but she knew what she was looking at. A holding cell 4B. A man lying on the floor in a puddle of something too dark to be just blood, and on the wall behind him, scrawled in something thick and rust-colored, were the words, "We were all there." Her hand trembled, not because of the blood, because she remembered that phrase. It was the first sentence of the transcript her family received after Noah's death, the sanitized debrief that came in a manila envelope with the Defense Department's seal. The sentence haunted her, even back then. We were all there. What did that mean? She assumed it was a group statement, a brotherhood thing. But now it felt like something else. Like a warning, or worse, an invitation. That's when the second character entered her story. He called himself Vernon Dale, tall, not young, with a weathered leather jacket that carried the scent of burnt tobacco and iron. Said he used to work in systems, though he never said which. He showed up in the corner booth of the 24-hour diner across from the precinct, sitting there like he'd been waiting years for her to show up. No one else even looked at him. "I saw what they did to your brother," he said without preamble. But it wasn't just him. "You don't remember that yet?" "Yet?" she asked, her throat dry. Vernon didn't blink. "Do you hear the ringing? Yet, in the shower, when it's quiet," she had. It started 2 nights after the signal. A high, faint frequency, barely audible, but always there, like a dog whistle pitched just above the threshold of sanity. Sometimes it stopped when she turned her head, sometimes it got louder when she closed her eyes. "That's not tinnitus," Vernon said, tapping the side of his own head. "It's a trigger. A trigger for what?" "To remember." The silence between them grew fat and heavy. She sipped cold coffee just to avoid the weight of his stare. When she glanced back at him, he was already sliding a folded sheet of paper across the table. "Is this a joke?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. On the paper, a black and white copy of a police lineup, her brother Griffin Daly, 2 other names she didn't recognize, and her own face, a younger version, maybe 15, but she had never been in that lineup. Not that she could recall. Vernon lit a cigarette with hands that shook slightly. "They took us into a room with no cameras. They called it the meet, no charges, no record, just questions." "What questions?" Vernon blew smoke toward the window. "Do you remember where you were during the February blackout? The one in 2013? She didn't. She remembered the news reports, the outages, the fires in Atlanta. But not where she had been. Not what she'd done. It was just blank. Vernon's lips twitched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's when they tested it. The loop. They called it forever meeting." Macy stood to leave, her knees weak. "You're not well." He didn't stop her, just muttered behind her back as she walked away. "You won't ever find the truth if you're still afraid of your own face." She didn't sleep that night. She played the voicemail again. The one her phone claimed didn't exist. Her brother's voice was faint, choked, almost underwater. "If they ask about self or B, don't tell them what you saw. Don't trust anyone who." Then static. Then a sharp bang in the background. And then, right before the message cut off completely, a woman's voice whispering the same words she'd heard before. He remembered. The next day, she tried to pull her personnel file. The system froze. Her ID came back as revoked Section 12. No one in HR had ever heard of Section 12. Later that night, she found a thumb drive in her glove compartment, one she hadn't placed there. It contained a single file, CCTV footage from 2019. Low quality, grainy, but clear enough. The holding cell. Cell for B. Griffin was on the floor, bloodied. Officer Daly stood over him. But what made her gasp, what made her hand fly to her mouth, was the third person in the video, her Griffin ward. Never blinked when a man screamed. 17 years in Iraq taught him that real pain rarely makes a sound. So when the baton cracked against his ribs the first time, and again across his jaw, he didn't cry out. What chilled him wasn't the violence. It was the look in Officer Daly's eyes. Like he was proud of it, like he wanted him to break. No body cam footage surfaced for the first 72 hours. No formal ID check was run. And no one, not even Griffin's neighbors, knew where he'd gone. Just another unidentified suspect resisting arrest. The report was barely 4 lines long. But beneath those lines, somewhere between the smudged ink and the crooked signatures, was a name no one had dared to say in that precinct. A name that, if spoken aloud, would tear open a decade-old secret buried under commendations, military silence, and an agreement never meant for daylight. It started with a whisper. Macy Travers, a 24-year-old dispatcher fresh out of training, was halfway through her night shift when the call came in a static-laced emergency signal. Silent except for a distorted voice murmuring *, he's not supposed to be here. The voice was shaky, but not scared. It was familiar. A voice Macy hadn't heard in nearly 15 years. Her brother's voice, her brother who died in Afghanistan. She checked the source tag twice. The signal had come from inside the holding cells of the 6th Precinct. From Cell 4B, a room that hadn't been used since the electrical fire in 2019, when she asked Daly about it the next morning. He just stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Said there was no Cell 4B anymore. Claimed she must have misread the system, that maybe she needed rest. Macy nodded, smiled, walked out and threw up behind her car. Because her brother's last message, before he'd stepped onto that Blackhawk, was the same thing she heard through that crackling static. Word for word. By the time she returned to her desk, the audio file was gone. The signal erased, no record of her even logging in. She started digging. And that's when she found Griffin's name. Not in arrest records, those had been altered, but in a VA system, flagged top clearance. Notes, redacted. Deployment history marked conflict unknown. But one file hadn't been touched yet. A disciplinary hearing, witness, Griffin Ward. Accusation, unauthorized footage, confession, none, verdict, transferred, discharged with honor. But the footage, never found, until last night at 2:14 a.m. Macy received an untraceable video link titled Only Forever, meeting no sender, no subject. The video played a dim room, a cracked mirror, and Griffin, bleeding, whispering into the camera with what sounded like his final breath. It's not what they did to me, it's what they're hiding behind the badge. Before the screen went black, another voice whispered behind him. A voice Macy couldn't place. A woman's. Measured. Almost smiling. He remembered. And then static. Only, this time, she wasn't alone. A baby in the apartment upstairs had started crying. Loud, sharp, guttural wails. Nothing unusual until the baby stopped mid-scream and clearly, unmistakably, said her brother's name, Noah. Macy ran to the window. The streetlight flickered, and standing on the curb, looking up at her, was Griffin Ward. But he'd been pronounced dead 4 nights ago. Standing in the corner, unmoving, watching. She didn't remember being there. She didn't remember any of it. The next day, her apartment door was ajar. When she came home, nothing stolen, just rearranged. Her bed was made, though she never made it. The mirror in the bathroom had been wiped clean, but in the corner, a message had been scrawled in red lipstick. Remember what you forgot. And then the dreams began. Not violent, not overtly terrifying, just wrong. She saw her brother sitting at the edge of her bed, whispering about tunnels under the city that no one was allowed to map. She saw herself in a white room, her hands bound, a doctor asking, "What do you hear?" before the crying. She saw Vernon, stitched mouth open like a puppet, whispering, "You don't live where you think you do." Each morning, she woke with bruises in new places, and the baby upstairs. Gone, no record of any family living above her. The landlord claimed those units had been vacant for years. When she demanded the truth from her supervisor at dispatch, he smiled too wide and said, "Don't you remember your leave of absence?" "I never took a leave." His smile widened. "Sure, Macy. You've been gone 6 months." She checked her bank account. 6 months of deposits. Pay stubs. Utility bills, but she couldn't remember a single moment. Then her voicemail beeped again. One new message. No number. Just static. And in the middle of it, a child's voice, unmistakable. We were all there. She dropped the phone. She knew, now, what Vernon meant. It wasn't about Griffin. It wasn't about Noah. It was about the fact that something had rewritten her memories, not erased them, buried them, and it wanted her to dig. But the moment she started to uncover the truth, reality began to crack. The light switches clicked themselves on at night. Water boiled when she hadn't touched the stove. Her reflection sometimes mouthed things she hadn't said. And in every darkened screen, in every powered-off device, she saw one thing. Griffin. Watching her. Waiting. And when she finally built up the nerve to call Vernon, the line rang once. Then a voice her own answered and said, "Don't you remember? Vernon never existed." The call ended, and that night, under her bed, she found a folder with her name on it. Inside, one photo, one name, and a post-it note that read, check, cell 4B again. This time, don't look away. Then a date. Tomorrow, June 28, and she realized she wasn't uncovering the mystery, she was being led to it, and someone, was watching to see what she'd do next. The rain started just before dawn, soft at first, then louder, almost performative, like it knew it was being listened to. Macy sat in her car across from the precinct, still gripping the folder she wasn't supposed to have. Her hands ached, her lips were dry and split from chewing, but inside, she felt calm, a kind of calm that didn't belong to her, like she had borrowed it from someone who hadn't survived long enough to feel panic. She watched the building. Across the street, the windows lit one by one as the early shift arrived, uniforms moving like shadows in their morning ritual. For the first time in weeks, Macy believed she was close, that this was the day the curtain would be pulled back. Cell for B. The folder contained a key, no label, no logo, but her fingers had curled around it like they already knew its shape. She'd gone back through everything. The footage, the voice messages, even the conversation with Vernon who may or may not have existed. In every fragment, every glitch of memory, the coordinates pointed to one place. That cell, the room that supposedly didn't exist anymore. But something about it had remained, like a rotten tooth beneath polished gums, untouched but infected. She timed her entry, waited until the shift swap created a blind spot at the back entrance, then walked straight in. No alarms, no resistance. The station felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just dulled. As if someone had turned down the volume of the world around her. Fluorescent lights buzzed without blinking. Phones rang but no one picked up. Somewhere in the back, a television was on mute, showing static instead of news. The lower-level cells hadn't been used in years. Most were sealed, others emptied for renovation, but no real work had ever been done. The stairs groaned as she descended, the concrete walls sweating with cold, and then there it was. At the end of the hallway, buried behind a fake maintenance door, a card reader blinked once as she approached. She pressed the keycard. The light turned green. The door clicked. The room smelled like copper and ozone, like something mechanical had died here, that it wasn't how she remembered it from the footage. The walls were covered in thick acoustic foam, torn in places, as if someone had clawed at them. A single cot bolted to the floor, a drain in the center, and a camera blinking red still alive. She stepped inside and felt the floor pulse beneath her, not in vibration, but memory, a weight that pulled her backwards. She could feel herself standing in this room, even though she couldn't place when the air tasted familiar. Then she saw it behind the foam, barely visible under the flickering light scratches in the concrete. Not words, patterns, repeating loops, spirals, and teeth. Clocks with melted faces, and the phrase, carved over and over, like a compulsion, remember where we went. She knelt by the cot, heart hammering now. Tucked beneath it, wrapped in a plastic evidence sleeve, was a VHS tape. She didn't know how she knew it was meant. For her, she just knew. The station's old media room had a functioning player, dust-covered, forgotten. The TV took a few tries to power on. When it did, the screen bloomed in static before snapping into grainy footage. Date stamp, February 17, 2013. The blackout, the day she couldn't remember. The day her brother died. The video showed a room. White walls, 5 chairs. 4 people. Strapped in, Griffin Noah, Officer Daly, and her, a woman, stood behind them. Face blurred but the voice. The voice was hers. She was speaking calmly, methodically. Patient 4 has retained the memory, despite disorientation protocol. Recommend escalation to loop 3. She watched her cell folder, Colder give the order. Then leave. Then everything on screen looped. The video started again. Same room, same people, same movements, but slight differences. A blink held too long, a breath skipped. Macy leaned forward, and suddenly she was in the tape. She could feel the cuffs on her wrists, could smell the sterile bleach in the air, could hear her brother's voice in her left ear, whispering, if you're seeing this again, it means, we failed. She ripped the tape from the player and screamed. The image burned into her eyes even after the screen went dark. This wasn't about corruption, not just cops, not even the government. This was a test, repeated, monitored, controlled, a loop built from memory fragments, each cycle testing how much truth could be buried. Before the subject collapsed, she was the subject. She had always been the subject. The people she'd trusted, her brother, Vernon, even Griffin, they were pieces of the loop, anchors, or maybe bait. Her phone buzzed. She answered without thinking. You made it farther this time, a woman's voice said. Not hers, not someone she recognized. But you're still asking the wrong question. What is this? Macy asked, eyes wide, sweat dripping down her back. You keep trying to solve the loop, the voice said softly, but you never ask why you entered it. A sound followed. A single tone, soft, musical, rising in pitch. The same sound she heard in the shower. The trigger, the floor beneath her shifted. The station began to fade details, smudging like wet ink. Doors vanished. Lights dimmed, and in their place, the other memory surfaced. A hospital, no windows, her hands shaking as she signed a consent form. Her brother standing beside her whispering, asterisk, it's just a trial. 1 week, we need the money. Asterisk, she had volunteered. The loop wasn't a punishment. It was her choice. She was the first to enter the experiment. She agreed to forget, but something went wrong. She'd remembered too much. The loop broke. Others died. But the worst part wasn't that she had agreed, it was that she had been back here before. Dozens of times, maybe more. Each time she forgot. And each time, someone else had to die to restart it. The rain outside wasn't real, neither was the baby, or the building, or the bruises. It had all been constructed an immersive memory cage with one goal, to hide the reason she had chosen to enter. To forget what she had done. And just as she began to piece it together, just as clarity dawned, like the sun rising over a battlefield, final twist struck, the reflection in the black TV screen didn't move when she did. It smiled and whispered, asterisk, asterisk, ready for the next cycle. Asterisk, asterisk, and the screen cut to black. There had always been others, watching, waiting. Macy just hadn't known how to see them before. Maybe it was because she hadn't reached this far in the loop before, hadn't cracked open enough of herself to notice the threads woven around her life, invisible but humming with presence. The first clue came not through a vision or a voice, but from the rusted back of a highway sign, spray-painted in a shade of deep crimson that only appeared under certain light. She noticed it on the drive back from the precinct for vertical lines, one slashed diagonally through, prison tally marks, and beneath them, faint and flaking. Asterisk, asterisk, you're not the only one awake. Asterisk, asterisk, no signature, no explanation, just truth, raw and staring. The second came that night. In the dream, not hers but one, she entered. The difference was subtle at first. The walls were hers, the floor, the same creaking wood, but the pictures on the shelves were wrong. They weren't of her family. They were photos of other people, strangers in uniforms, in hospital beds, staring into cameras with expressions hollowed out by understanding. And in the center of the dream stood a man she didn't know, but recognized. His name was carved into her memory like a scar. Tom Whitaker, the man from the debrief files she was never meant to see. A test subject who went missing during the 2004 loop trials, declared psychotically compromised, then redacted from all public records. But here he was, speaking to her through the dream like it was a walkie-talkie across time. You think this is about you, he said, standing beneath a ceiling fan that didn't move. But you're just the next to remember. We all wake up eventually. That's the design. Design, she asked, her voice distorted, like it belonged to someone else. They told you it was for memory restoration, a treatment, a way to fix the trauma. He leaned in close, eyes bloodshot and pleading. But they weren't restoring anything. They were rewriting. Every loop, every test, every episode. It's architecture. Memory is geography. They build the world around you, then change the coordinates. That's why none of us remember the same place, the same way. She tried to speak but couldn't. Her mouth was full of ash. Tom's voice dropped. You don't understand yet. You're not dreaming your own mind. You're inside someone else's recollection, a place we all passed through. This isn't recovery. It's containment. She woke up to the sound of her name being whispered through her laptop speakers. Even though the machine was shut, and a file new, unmarked now, sat on her desktop. A video. No date. No sender. Just the title. Asterisk, asterisk, they thought you forgot. Asterisk, asterisk, she didn't click it. Not yet. She needed to know who else had seen it. She returned to the diner. Same booth. Same silence. But this time, a napkin was waiting for her. Folded, no handwriting. Just a single red circle, drawn with what smelled like iodine, and a tiny thumbprint inside. A waitress she'd never seen before poured her coffee, and said, "It's nice to see someone else moving forward." "How long have I been here?" Macy asked. The woman smiled without warmth. "Depends who's watching." And just like that, Macy started to see them. People she had passed 100 times without noticing. The janitor who always swept the same section of sidewalk, the librarian who never looked up, the man on the bus who blinked too slowly. All of them wore symbols small, hidden in plain sight. An earring shaped like a spiral. A patch on a bag that changed color when you weren't looking directly at it. A tattoo of a phrase. Asterisk, asterisk, we saw it too. Asterisk, asterisk, they weren't ghosts. They weren't agents. They were witnesses. Each of them had gone through it. The loop, the glitch, the forgetting, and they were trying to communicate. She found a message scratched into the inside of her mailbox. Asterisk, asterisk, channel 67, 3:14 a.m. You'll know it's real if the screen doesn't show your face. Asterisk, asterisk. So she waited, turned on the old TV, taped the windows shut, turned every mirror in the house to face the wall, and at 3:14 a.m., she found it buried between dead air and infomercials, a channel that didn't officially exist. What played wasn't footage, it wasn't a broadcast. It was memory, not hers, someone else's. It began with a child screaming in a room without walls, a man pleading through an intercom, and a voice, always the same voice, saying, begin next cycle. Permission granted, she watched herself walk into frame. Over and over, sometimes older, sometimes younger, always confused, always compliant, and in every version, the observer's faceless, backlit watched without blinking. At the end of the reel, the screen flickered into words. This is your third initiation. You were right all along. Her nose bled. She didn't notice until the drops hit her lap. When she turned off the TV, there was a symbol burned into the screen's glass. A circle, 4 vertical lines. And the 5th, slashed across, the same symbol as before. And suddenly, it was everywhere. On mailboxes, traffic signs, bathroom stalls, scratched into playground equipment. The city was littered with MSPLE markers, left behind by others who had remembered something they weren't supposed to. Something outside the program. She understood then. The loop wasn't just a test. It was a containment protocol. A way to trap not just memory, but people. Those who saw too much, asked the wrong questions. Not just veterans, not just volunteers, civilians too. Anyone who came too close to whatever they were hiding. And the scariest part, no one who went in ever really left. Some lived normal lives, forgetting everything. A soft reset every few years. Others woke up screaming and never stopped. Some joined the observers. Some became part of the architecture and moving characters in someone else's loop, and Macy was starting to realize something even more disturbing. She might already be 2 or 3 versions removed from her original self. The real her may have died long ago, and the person remembering all this, now this version, was just a fragment, a shard of the whole, regrown inside the loop like a severed limb stitched to a new body. The man watching from across the streets, same face as Griffin, but younger, nodded slowly, as if confirming a terrible thought she hadn't spoken aloud. Next morning, her voicemail buzzed with a message that hadn't been sent from any known number. A child's voice whispered, found footage from 20 years ago. You're in it, and then silence. She checked the drive again, the one she hadn't touched, plugged it in. This time the folder opened. Inside, hundreds of videos. Different times, different cities, same experiment. People remembering, people screaming, people vanishing. The same red circle marked in every frame. And in the final video, black and white. Security footage from 2005, she watched as a young girl sat at a desk, headphones on, answering 911 calls in a room with no clocks. A man walked in, whispered something into her ear. She turned out it was Macy, but the voice from the speakers was hers, now, older, awake, and it said only this. This is the version where you don't forget. The screen flickered and went black, but she could feel it. Someone watching from behind her eyes, waiting to see what she'd do next, and somewhere deep inside the system, buried behind layers of loops, memory glitches, and sanitized reports stamped never released a record, began to play again. Cycle 7. Initiation in progress. The ending wasn't the end, it was the moment she realized you've been watching this story too.